So, hey everyone, happy Friday. We still got a minute or two before we roll the official intro and get to the topics at hand. But yeah, just hi and hi guys, and we're just discussing the artist formerly known as the Dessert Linux, or not really, but one of the things that people play on my handle. And I have been known to consume dessert before, otherwise I'd be in much better shape. And I have been a proud Linux user for about 6 years now. So I guess fits.
What's your like Linux distro of choice?
Ubuntu, of course. I'm too much of a moron to go past that, you know.
Me too, actually.
Yeah. I mean, let's be honest, Ubuntu works fantastic like 360 days out of the year. It's just like you don't even need to do anything. A normie can use it. But then those like other 5 or so days, like that's when you're in command line hell. And before the advent of ChatGPT, like it was tricky. Now it's pretty easy. I just go to find.com, PHIND, and then I just type in how do I X whatever, and it just tells me literally what to type into the terminal, and then yay, it works.
See, I skip all of that, and I just call Kai. I go, please help me.
has he actually done this?
Apparently, I'm the tech support.
Yeah, I mean, I'm sure there's a bunch of jokes, insensitive jokes I can make about that, but that's for a different podcast. That's not funded by the nice Zcash folks. So
yeah, we'll do a late night version.
Yeah, Railgun after dark.
Ooh,
that would be like, I don't know exactly what you guys' ability is to be spicy in like public statements and things like that, but if you do have any kind of a freedom like that, then that wouldn't be a bad idea to do a Railgun After Dark podcast or Twitter space and just like,
it'd be a lot of fun. Maybe we could like lure some other people in there. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Just do like DeFi After Dark.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah,
I'm sure someone's already done a DeFi After Dark. In fact, I'm just gonna search.
Oh no, I got dragged into one. I got thrown into the deep end on a DeFi After Dark. So I know for a fact.
Ooh, there is a show. There's a couple of results, not many.
Do you guys remember that up only that happened right after the Wintermute hack? And I think they had all sorts of people in there. I forget who it was. Does anybody remember who was in that Twitter space? I think one of the team like in like the head dudes in charge for Wintermute was there, and yeah, I don't know if you can recreate that magic though.
Yeah, what a strange podcast name too, because it's clearly false advertising,
yeah. Not financial advice, right?
Yeah, the Not Financial Advice Podcast. That would be another good name. Let's see. I got a few people watching. It seems like ever since I started doing this on Twitter, i.e., last week, it seems to be that's where it's at with the stuff. People seems to be just a lot more popular. I guess it's just a lot easier to access. And that I guess that makes sense from like a user experience perspective, because where are people hanging out? If you're hanging out on Twitter and then all of a sudden you see a Twitter thing pop up, you just start watching. Whereas, if you're like, no one's just staring at YouTube, or some people are, but they're usually watching a thing. And no one just like scrolling through YouTube and all of a sudden a thing pops up. They're like, oh, let me watch that. The likelihood is a lot lower. And so I guess it kind of makes sense. Elon's going really, ham on this whole thing with trying to get, messaging and voice calls and stuff through and everything. And, trying to do like the everything app type thing, which is a fantastic idea, but there's just the layers of the privacy problems, and the KYC and the payment stuff, and then just one man controlling even more of the world. And I don't know.
Right.
There's a lot of layers to it, but I'll be a happy user as long as, I don't get like defunded and then I'll start like yelling at him again.
Yeah, I mean, you bring up a good point. I mean, like the one thing that's certain is that like centralized like actors cannot be trusted with your data, right? Um, in fact, I just gave a talk at a conference about that very thing, and it's one of the most compelling reasons for peer-to-peer ecosystems like cryptocurrency, right? Where like the control is at the end user level, right? It's even cooler when it's like zero knowledge, right? Because
Yeah,
then
of
you have
course.
like, read access, like, permissions that you can control, which are really, really cool. Like, if you think about it from like a hacker perspective, right? These like peer-to-peer ecosystems are much more challenging to attack, right? So if somebody wants to attack, say, I don't know, like Apple's UDID and leak, 12.3 million users' information, which happened, by the way. Real story. You can Google about that.
Yeah, I thought that was an
you
oddly
can do that.
specific hypothetical. I'm like, oh, wow. I wouldn't have gone there, but sure. It's like, oh, okay.
But suffice it to say, right? You can target like one vector and open up a data lake, which is a treasure trove. But whenever you think about it in a peer-to-peer ecosystem, you have to go to every single person, right? So the Desert Linux, you have to go to Kai, you have to go to Allan, right? The list goes on, and you have to like go user by user by user. And so like this attack surface area, just it totally changes the dynamic, and that's. I don't know. Sorry for getting into the weeds of it, but like that's what makes me so excited about like ZK, right? It's like it really adds like this super beautiful privacy element to data, and it's proven that it's needed. I mean, Deloitte did a survey actually earlier this year, and they found that companies that spend more than make more than $5 billion in revenue a year are going to spend $250 million on cybersecurity, right? And in spite of that, in that same survey, 91% of companies surveyed had an exploit or some sort of like cyber event, which I really love how they tactfully put that. In other words, they got hacked, man. And so like, in spite of all this like money being spent on cybersecurity, it's just proven that like centralized and like concentrated data lakes with people's information isn't the way to do it. And so like peer-to-peer ecosystems for the win. Like that's why we need this stuff.
Absolutely. It's kind of crazy to think that like it's just a lot of people like you get maybe the libertarian type angle first, where people are just like, well, I don't want to control my own stuff and it's no one's business. But then you don't have to dig very deep to start realizing, like, I think you'd have to be an idiot to just be like, well, I don't care about that angle, so therefore I don't care, because there's so much else. But it's probably a good time to roll the intro graphic and officially get in this thing. All right, let's go.
Oh yeah, of course.
Ready? 3, 2, 1, intro. So hey everyone, officially again, happy Friday. This is the Zcash Podcast, proudly funded by the Zcash Minor Grants Program from the Zcash Foundation. Very grateful for that. And I am joined by some of the coolest people in the crypto and privacy space, the Railgun Boys. You should have some sort of a cool, name like that, like with the Nelk Boys or whatever, the Railgun Boys. But Allan, Scott, and Kieran Mesquita. How's it going?
Hey, how's it going, man? Thanks for having us on.
Yeah, how's it going?
GM.
It's
going good.
Yeah, GM. On a side note, that is hilarious how somehow GM became such a thing in the crypto world, where it's hit peak, like it's become a thing when people are already saying it's like linking it to like far right whatever. They're saying it's a far right symbol of whatever. It's like, all right, it's hit the culture. Sorry,
Yeah, saying good, mass market,
saying good morning to people. But anyway, I thought I'd have you guys on because, first of all, I know you guys pretty well, which is nice. You guys are good people, and that's always that's not always a given in the crypto space, foreshadowing. But also because I think that when there was a time when there was a ZK boom, I guess, like right around when Zcash came out, where just about every project was like, no, we got it too. Look, we ZK Starks, Snarks, Sparks, Smarks, whatever, just everything. Right. And there's obviously with every big, hype bubble and going away, it you kind of have a settling out for a while, and then like the whole like, oh, you can do zero knowledge on Ethereum, and then I just see like the most awful Ethereum privacy in the world. Then I sort of run into Railgun by happenstance, and I'm like, oh, this is actually starting to feel like the hype from before. It's actually starting to feel like something very fascinating. It's like, oh, this is actually building something cool. So with all that word salad out of the way, would you mind just introducing yourselves and saying how you got into crypto and how you got more into the privacy part in particular?
I guess I'll go first. I'm Allan. Most people call me the janitor around the Railgun community. I'm not technically literate. I don't do any coding or anything like that. But I am really quite passionate about privacy. I got into crypto, I guess, in maybe 2017-ish, from a more like financial nerd background. I worked in the TradFi space before this, and so I really got into like trading. And trading was really cool. Had a lot of fun doing that. Started to move all that on chain. Ethereum became really cool. Uniswap had an alpha, and it was really interesting. Like most people who are like in the I guess the crypto world, if you're a real degenerate, you're on Telegram and Discord, right?
Yeah. The top two places in crypto to get scammed.
Yeah, 100%, right. And so so I was on Telegram, and I had somebody like DM me and like ask, I was in a group of like trading nerds, and somebody DM'd me and was like, hey, how'd you get into position X? How'd you hear about that one? And I hadn't like told anybody about that particular position, and that's kind of how it became. Like I was pretty ignorant at the time, but I became very well aware of all of our favorite tool, Etherscan for Ethereum. You can go and anytime somebody does a transaction with you, you can go and proceed to judge them harshly for all of their financial decisions on chain. And that's kind of how I figured out like privacy was really bad in Ethereum. And then I heard about this like Railgun project thing that was coming together, and I thought it was super neat because it really sort of attacked the space in a very interesting way, and that is from like the wallet side of privacy. There was always sort of like these L2s and like payment chains that are all really interesting, and like Zcash, for example, works really well in its own regard. But the ecosystem that I was so passionate about was Ethereum, and it's public. And this offered like a really neat way to sort of participate in the ecosystem that I wanted to, and have the privacy that I need to be a crypto degen without being judged about what's in my wallet.
Yeah, of course. And on the judgment of what's in your wallet and stuff, that does remind me of right around when I found out about Railgun, started doing some digging, is right when the Trump NFT drop happened. And I mean, and I can imagine why a lot of people would be potentially judged harshly for some sort of an ownership of that, because I mean, I personally don't, because first off, it's like he wasn't even the sitting president at the time, I don't think, but like, a former president, an old person, does an NFT drop of like him in like action figure poses and just weird stuff. It's like, of course you have to do that, and also you
like
have
American flag and eagles behind him and things.
Yeah, and you have to get in on that at least to like speculate on what other people are going to do around it. But I mean, having that sort of association can really make like, oh, you financially support this person who's involved in trying to overthrow the government, whatever you want to say. There's a million angles of, if you're part of that could be a big no-no. And so it is kind of, it's also very fascinating that you kind of picked up on the why privacy is a big deal right away. People don't. There's so many people who've been using stuff like Ethereum, was one of the worst offenders, right? For a very long time. It's just like, meh. They don't. It's like either they're a privacy nerd or they're just like, meh.
Well, yeah. I think it's. I want to hear from Kai. Actually,
yeah, I do too.
Kai, introduce yourself, bro.
Yeah, I'm Kai, or Kieran, Kyron, whatever variation you've had. When did I get into crypto? The answer to when is yes.
Yeah.
No, that in
crypto,
honesty,
you didn't get into crypto. Crypto got into you.
Hey.
Yeah. No, but yeah. In honesty, when I first heard about it and started doing things with crypto, it's probably a little bit too young to actually understand like the actual impact or what any of the stuff is. It's just, oh hey, magic online money, like that seems cool. Heard about it through some like adjacent excuse me. Yeah, heard about it from some adjacent communities that shall not be named on a YouTube live stream, but you're welcome to ask me directly. Yeah, that's my introduction to it. As far as privacy goes, I think it's always sort of a bit of a privacy advocate, but it seemed like, maybe around 2018, 2019 or so, it was starting to seem like a lot of the development in the crypto space was moving in the opposite direction. So there was a lot of new use cases that were being built, but the privacy aspect of it, and making sure that you don't, by default, publish all of your financial data for the world to see, wasn't keeping up. And so we had privacy for transactional systems. Zcash was a thing by then, and there were other attempts at building private crypto, various coin joins and other approaches, but it always seemed to be like one step behind where the actual usage for all of the stuff was. And so I started looking at privacy for crypto, and specifically privacy for generalized use cases of crypto, like smart contract platforms, more closely. Started working on a few designs for privacy systems, and that eventually culminated in joining up with a couple of other like-minded privacy advocates and working on Railgun. So that's a bit of the backstory.
Nice. Yeah, and it is a good point. I've noticed that thing too. That with the crypto development of the space, there have been leaps in innovation to a certain amount, but then a ton of like coattail riding. And I kind of feel like 2009 obviously like Bitcoin hits the scene, and up until like I guess the 2013 2014 kind of like alt boom, like right around that 2015 like up to and including Zcash kind of alt boom. Zcash was kind of a latecomer to that era alt boom. I feel like people were trying to take things a next step beyond original Bitcoin and Ethereum and stuff. And then I feel like there was sort of a halt around that point where people just sort of filled out the ecosystem, but kind of like did a lot of shortcuts. The era of shortcuts was like up through the 2017 boom and then the 2021 boom. There's still developments. Things are still getting better, but for the most part, people are just like, decentralization, we don't need that. Privacy, we don't need that. just a good launch where it isn't just like one founder who like has all the tokens is going to get the pantsuit off of him by Gensler in a couple of years. Whatever, that's fine. It's kind of interesting how like I think that the privacy thing is starting to like, it's like a figment in crypto people's minds a little bit. It's starting to pop in there, but then it's going to be in the next few years, people are going to be like all about it. Kind of like when people, well, I don't get too political with stuff. Let's just leave that out. But like, people are going to really be on it, and thankfully, there's people like you guys who saw it and have been working on it before anyone cared. You know.
So I think that I like really agree with that, right? And we have to like, I think if we look at history, you know, maybe it doesn't like repeat itself, but it does like sort of rhyme, right? Yeah. And you know, it's so like the advent of the internet was a really, really powerful tool, and it took a long time for people to figure that out, right? And I think that, you know, it took us even longer, ironically, to figure out that like encryption on the internet was a good thing. In fact, there's like legal cases about all of this stuff, and ultimately, you know, I would argue that encryption is like what brought on this like Cambrian explosion of like online commerce and like the boom of the Internet of Things, because people could like trust these new commerce rails with you know, their credit card information, for example, and know that somebody wasn't like, you know, stealing their credit card information online, right? And this you know, SSL encryption is, you know, part of the toolkit that makes that kind of thing possible. So when you go to Amazon and you know, you buy something on impulse or whatever that may be, you can trust that whenever you put your Visa card in, it's not going to be stolen by some, you know, third-party actor. And so like that, like rhyme in crypto is going to be that like ledgers, and like in order for this stuff to be adopted as like the new rails for the Internet of Things, like there has to be encryption in the tech stack. Otherwise, it doesn't really work. Like the entirety of like traditional commerce just sort of erodes away. Like, you know, there's the classic example of like going to a coffee shop and, you know, swiping your crypto debit card, and then the barista proceeding to judge you harshly for, you know, shopping at Food Lion instead of Whole Foods or something, right? And so,
yeah, of course,
you know, and so like this is only natural that this kind of thing will come to. Well, the converse is true, right? You know, because then you could like, you know, snoop on the coffee shop and see how much they're paying the barista and this sort of thing, right? But yeah, the point I'm really driving at is like this is like important and like pragmatic, not just like, you know, the cypherpunk ideals aside, like it's a very pragmatic thing to have for this to really take off.
Yeah, and that's the thing that I think is partially lost, and I think this is where the whole Railgun picture kind of comes in a little clearer, is I think a lot of people kind of only think of direct financial privacy as if all they post on Facebook everything that they buy. And that's already bad enough, right? But there's certain limitations. Like, for example, if people knew everything I bought, it's just like, okay, well, I mean, I got a chainsaw because I need to cut some trees up for the winter. And then, okay, well, I keep going to this one coffee place a lot. There's just, oh, he really likes that place. Yes, I do. And then just like, oh, he flew out and went to this place. Okay, fine. I don't want anyone to know any of those things, like, without me telling them, right? But at the same time, if it gets out, I'm not super, you know, it's the usual normie argument. But
well,
then
it's a bit worse, right?
Yeah.
You know, because it's not just like they can track you; they can also know how much is in your bank account.
Yeah.
like it's one thing to like take an
Instagram
picture
weird.
with a pretty latte, right? It's like it's totally something else when like your entire like financial like history and balance is like displayed out there in real time, mind you, right? You know,
yeah, and the
Ethereum blocks are like every 15 seconds, so that's damn near real time. So.
And the thing is, I get, because the end user just doesn't think about stuff like that, and I guess they shouldn't necessarily. They didn't have to, I should say. But some people are thinking about. It's not just, you look at all the things I buy. It's nothing to be ashamed of. It's like, okay, but then what happens with the mass data collection around your profile? It says, okay, you make this much money, your taxes are going to go up because, or I mean, it already happens, but like some companies are going to start to charge you more because they know you can pay that because you can afford it. All of a sudden, it literally costs you. Your insurance, your other things go up. Oh, we did this picture showing that you support mostly businesses that have a certain political affiliation or whatever, or a carbon footprint or whatever. Now that you get that, now it starts to get tricky where it's like, no, like you're in trouble now, and then you don't get hired because you patronize too many businesses of a certain kind. They're like, well, you're not a good culture fit for this company, and they just like, there you go, you don't get an opportunity. And this is even like really passive, like really like this is like an NPC we're talking about. We're not talking about a spicy person like maybe some of us. Like we're talking about just a complete NPC can easily just have their life molded and affected by all these kinds of things. And then that's just the money part that people aren't seeing. But the thing is, once you start getting in, this is just the purchases, I should say. But then we start to get into other things like NFTs, for example. Are they supporting causes that are now more explicit? How about property ownership type things? Like, oh, he owns a, like, does this represent a property thing? How about like investments? Now you get to like, not just, oh, my little spending money. It's like, now these are my investments. And then now people, all that kind of stuff, the more complicated, the more involved these kind of get, I guess the more pertinent and powerful they become in your life. And if someone knows all that about you or all that about everyone, there can be just massive personal or societal exploitation can happen. And it's pretty crazy.
Right. Yeah. So I guess I think about it too, like, I guess the side that's not frequently talked about in these conversations, at least in my opinion, is like the technical aspects of things. Mm-hmm. The reality of the situation, at least in my opinion, is that it's super hard to make privacy. It's so like hats off to the people like Kai and the folks that are researching Hisham, who did cryptography research. Guy's got a PhD in cryptography or something like that. And, the Zcash team, the folks who wrote things like Monero, like this stuff is really, really complicated. And it gets really, really complicated whenever you're looking at like the D app, the decentralized app world, right? Because like verifying like DApp economics and like that like privacy is working and like all the things that you're expecting to happen are happening, and like having like that ability to like third party verify that like Uniswap has the liquidity that you're expecting, and like Aave has a lot of liquidity that you need, and like this lending mechanism, like it's really difficult. Like it's super hard, and it's really, really difficult to do that in a private way. In fact, I would argue it's damn near impossible. And so that's why like privacy from the wallet side, at least in my opinion, is better, right?
Yeah.
Because you can have like individual actor privacy, and you could still have like that wholly auditable on-chain like record of the apps that you want to interact with. So for example, if I have a ETH and I want to swap it for some sort of stable coin, these are really popular, right? So I want to swap it for DAI or USDC or USDT. I can actually go and look at the contract and verify that liquidity is there. I'm going to get the price that I expect, right? That's that auditability that people like, and it's so beautiful. But I don't think that should extend to like the individual wallet side. And that's like, to me, that's what makes like 0ZK addresses in like, Railgun is really, really cool.
Yeah, well, let's actually use that to jump into what is Railgun? So, yeah, what is it? Railgun. What is it?
Yeah. Kai, you want to tell us a little bit about Railgun?
Yeah, I think Allan's already kind of covered most of it, but essentially it's a wallet-side privacy system. So it tackles privacy at the layer that people or enter into interactions with the apps, and so there's a couple of advantages to doing it that way. So one, obviously you don't need to write your DApp specifically for a privacy system. You write it in your like regular Solidity like public interactions, Railgun users can like interact with arbitrary applications or dApps on the same chain. So, like Allan said, you get auditability of all these protocols, which is a huge advantage of DeFi. You can make sure that the protocol that you're interacting with, like, oh, it says it's like fully collateralized or over collateralized. Well, like, look at the smart contract. Does it have I don't know, it's got $1 billion like outstanding. Does it have $1 billion in reserve? So you can go and actually verify that, but at the same time, the users don't have all of their private data published by default. So it's a private wallet system, and that's actually.
Yeah, I mean that's the best way to put it, right? It's a private wallet system. I think a lot of people here probably who are listening to this are like really familiar with like Zcash, right? So if you think about it through the lens of like Zcash, right, you have like these public transactions that you can perform, and you have like these private transactions that you can't perform, and like the whole goal of like the Railgun architecture is to sort of bring that to life on like DeFi chains that it's deployed on. And so it's all smart contract logic on chain. There's not like off-chain oracles or some weird wonky thing like that. It's all just on-chain smart contract logic. You can have your regular old public 0x address. Maybe you have transactions you don't mind being public, and then you can have like your 0zk addresses, right, where these are supported by the Railgun smart contract system, and you could use that private address to transact anonymously. Maybe you want to do some sort of like swap, or you want to do farming anonymously, or send tokens to people anonymously. Maybe you want to donate to the guys at Coin Center because those dudes do an awesome job trying to defend our rights in crypto.
Yeah, maybe you want to donate.
Shout out to the Coin Center guys.
Maybe you want to donate to FTX but not have anyone trace it back to you, or vice versa.
Yeah, I mean, it's funny you say that, but like this kind of thing so actually whenever people are familiar with Celsius, I'm assuming, right? And if you're not, please go Google, right?
Yeah, so
long story short,
CeFi,
they blew up.
Yeah, CeFi lending thingy that just scammed the crap out of people and everyone lost their money.
Yeah. Shout out to Alex Mashinsky and his team for being a bunch of shitheads. Suffice it to say, it was really, really bad, right? But what happened is their company, they filed bankruptcy, right? And one of the things that's very interesting about bankruptcy is that the list of creditors is public. And since this is a crypto thing, right? If you look at the docket, right, you look at the papers that were released, it basically gives you like TXIDs and like the amounts and this sort of thing. And then there's also like a list of people. And like long story short, people have like amnesia about this happening, but it totally happened on Twitter. People had like a field day, like going through and like doxing different people. They were like, "Oh man, look at this! Kai lost $100,000 on Celsius or something like this." Right?
I hope not.
I don't think Kai used Celsius, but suffice to say, like they, a lot of people got doxed by that, right?
Yeah.
And so it's like,
in fact, I remember
really
like going back to like the how this can impact people's real lives. A lot of Bitcoin maximalists have their names on that thing. And they were like, their entire, it's not just like a social thing, but a lot of people have built careers out of being maximalists, right? Out of being like, oh, only Bitcoin, here's my book, laser eyes, all that kind of stuff. A lot of people have done that. And this is like, I hate that I'm being the maximalist advocate here, but like if people want to like, that's their business. If they want to grift, people can get suckered into believing that, and you could literally destroy their livelihood by outing them as having had money on Celsius. And so then it can be. I personally think that that's kind of a good thing because hypocrites, whatever. But like that's just because I don't like them. If I did like them, it would be a terrible thing, right?
This is called being right for the wrong reasons. Like it's not exactly a good thing, right? I agree with you, right? Out with the grifters, please just, there's nothing. I think there's only like two things that are like incredibly bad, right, in the world, right? That's liars and thieves, right? These are like just shitty people, right? Especially in this space. And so, good grifters got, but like a lot of people, who were just, the lesser of us, unfortunately, I guess is a way to put it. The people who use these DeFi services aren't comfortable with DeFi, and they use these centralized services and trust these people, man. Like they trust them. So not only do they steal their money, they then proceeded to financially dox them. And this part of a legal process. I get it. But this is kind of the consequences, because in the traditional world, these bankruptcy proceedings, they list out the creditors, but it doesn't also take and give their bank account information. You know what I'm saying? It's not like someone BKs the creditor, they say, oh, this creditor is owed $10,000, and then it doesn't go and say this creditor, by the way, has $80,000 in their bank account, and their mortgage is $1,500 a month, and all these other things, right?
Yeah.
There's a lot of ramifications to this decentralized immutable ledger kind of thing, and that's one of them if it's public.
Yeah, and so I'm going to ask a really dumb kind of noob type question to kind of tease out a little bit more stuff. So how does Railgun actually work? Because there's a lot of discussion on, you don't want a bolt-on privacy thing. You want a ground-up privacy type approach. And then obviously you have stuff for example, Bitcoin and its children that don't really have very much built-in privacy. And so things that are built on top of them, like coin joins and stuff like that, kind of do their best, but there's just a lot of data leakage and things like that. It's just not kind of built, from the ground up with something that's kind of zero knowledge basically. But so for let's just say the idiot in the room who doesn't really understand, how Ethereum works to a very deep level, doesn't understand the smart contract kind of thing. How does Railgun actually function in a way that can kind of provide this zero knowledge functionality that isn't, I guess, natively available in the chain at all?
Kai, what do you think? What's the easy way to explain this?
So I think in terms of critique that ground up privacy is the only way to go. I can see that argument from a standpoint of making things private on, say, Bitcoin, or Litecoin, or chains like that, because the environment that you have to build the privacy-preserving application in is very constrained, right? Mm-hmm. So in Bitcoin, really, you only have transactions and basic forms of covenants, right, referred to as Bitcoin script. And so the actual tech that you can work with in order to make things private on Bitcoin is very limited. Mm-hmm. And so it's difficult to make things that don't have side channel data leakage on a system like Bitcoin, right? With you don't have that many options available to you. Railgun being built on EVM, right? So Ethereum and other compatible chains. You kind of lift that restriction, or a lot of the restrictions that you have on Bitcoin. So for one, you have a Turing complete or close to Turing complete environment that you can write code in. And so there's a lot more things that you can actually do. Right, you can essentially, as long as you're willing to pay the transaction cost, right? So on Ethereum, you pay for the computation of the transaction, right? So as long as you're willing to pay the transaction cost for whatever amount of computation you need, you can essentially, apply any technology to Ethereum. The downside is obviously, you pay for your transaction cost. And so the challenge is trying to make sure that whatever you build is efficient, right, rather than being constrained by the approach. But I don't think that's that big of a departure from other chains, right? If you're trying to apply privacy to the base layer, you want to make sure it's efficient, right? Because blockchains are an incredibly inefficient data structure. Layering on more inefficiency to an already inefficient data structure is just not going to work. And so, like, building on like a more open environment like Ethereum, I think, does sidestep a lot of those issues. In terms of like how Railgun actually works under the hood, so it uses a like an accumulator nullifier construction, which is like something that was kind of pioneered by the Zcash white paper and Zcash as one of the first coins to actually implement that technology. And so it pairs the accumulator nullifier construction with zero knowledge proof to essentially prove. So what you're proving is some balance was part of some set, so that's called an accumulator, and that you can spend that balance, and the new balance that you're creating is equal to the balance that you consume. So you can't create coins out of thin air, and then you cancel out the previous balance that you spent using a nullifier. And so a nullifier, without getting too technical, is a way of ensuring something within an accumulator or within a set of data can't be reused without linking or without specifying exactly what bit of data you spent. And so that was pioneered by Zcash. It's been built upon. There's a lot of other variations in the approach. When I worked on zero knowledge voting system that was built on the same sort of concept. So we use a variation of that in Railgun.
Yeah. So I guess that's a good, roll into the next thing, which is what's the relationship between Railgun and Zcash? What kind of technology, I guess, was used from Zcash, or kind of where's the connection there?
So, I mean, in terms of the privacy system or the design of the system is like both. Zcash has evolved a fair bit from the zero cash days. There's been a number of upgrades there. Railgun is based on zero cash as well. You see with a different set of upgrades or changes that are made to make it more efficient to run within an EVM system.
Yeah.
And so the kind of basis of the research is the same. We both use, Zcash used to use Grot16. They've moved on to a different ZK Snark system that's a bit better suited for the Zcash use case. Grot16 is still the most suitable system for Railgun's use case. And so there's this sort of like common ancestor of like the architecture that's used.
Yeah.
And a lot of the research that has been sponsored by the Zcash or Zcash Foundation, ECC, and various other contributors to Zcash has informed and has been used in the architecture of Railgun.
Very nice. It's so we kind of touched a little bit earlier on the privacy of the DeFi space and things like that, and how there kind of like pretty much is none. Yeah, so this is a little bit of an open-ended question, but how bad is it? Like, you would just talk about like maybe some of the worst examples you've seen, or just the overview of the whole space, or just kind of describe, because we kind of described like what is Railgun, where did it come from, blah blah blah. What is it useful for? And it's like, okay, well, applying privacy to a specific set of ecosystems, and so that's the solution to these problems. But what are the problems? Let's hit on some of those problems.
Yeah. So I think it is fair to say that like 99.9, fill in the significant figure you would like, 99999% of like all of like, DeFi, but, maybe even like broadly fair to say like, blockchain activity is wholly public. It is like completely open and, on a public ledger that's like broadcast out around the world, right?
Of course.
And this is like a bit of a no duh, but like this has like started a very interesting new business of like on-chain analytics. And some of them are used. You have like let's say Chainalysis, you have TRM Labs, Elliptic, Nansen. The list goes on, right? And so all of these companies are basically applying very sophisticated technology to the blockchain to take, collect, collate, and then sell user data. Like that's like their whole business model. It's like doxing as a service. So like that's like the whole point of what they're doing.
Doxing as a service.
And it's a new model, right? And this has raised lots of money, right? Because people are really interested in harvesting that information. Information is power, right? This is a pretty famous quote, I'm sure, somewhere in the world. Please Google it and find it. And the thing is like I always think about it from the context of like finance, right? Because that's like what drove me to this space, right? And the reality is like there's a ton of alpha hunting happening on like the DeFi ecosystem, and this prevents people from making large bets in this space, at least in my opinion, or it really kind of complicates how they participate in the ecosystem. And so there's different like services like I'm sure most people who are listening to this on Twitter probably follow whale watchers. It's like the number one like followed Twitter in like the ecosystem. And so like it basically just alerts people every time some large player takes and moves money in some sort of way. You have this company called Nansen, right? Nansen actually they participate in a lot of conferences. They had like this really, their swag's really cool. I'm not gonna lie to you guys. Like it's they got good swag, so stop by their booth. But like they had these like eye masks for like sleeping on like airplanes or something, and it's like says don't sleep on alpha, use Nansen, right? And like basically their premise is like, hey, if you want to like find sophisticated traders and copycat trade them, like you can use our service. And this erodes people's like trading advantage that they've probably spent hours upon hours researching, and maybe some funds spend millions of dollars trying to research this really sophisticated alpha to make money, right? And then there's like what's that new one, Kai? Is it called Arkham? Is that what it's called?
I've heard of the name.
Yeah,
they pop up a lot. Yeah,
it's Arkham, right? Yeah, and like
as in the asylum.
Yeah, because you got to be crazy to participate in that ecosystem. Well, I can't remember, like, what was their, like, it's like a catchphrase that they had, I forget what it was, man. Help me out, Kai. You're in the space. Like, they basically have a mechanism where people can, like, report and, like, dox people for pay. Like, it's the wildest thing ever.
Yeah, they copied that from the IRS,
Yeah. And so, I suffice it to say, like, I would argue that, like, if you're like into finance and if you're into trading, like a lot of the price action that's happened in crypto, especially like on chain, like Ethereum, was a bit of like on chain warfare. Like people would go and look at leverage positions and see what their like their liquidation point is, and like see if they could like push them to sell. Like that's what they would try to do, and this creates like a really unfair system. Where like smaller players, like individuals who are betting on things, are at the whims of people with lots of money. And maybe that's an analog for like traditional finance that we could say for that After Dark podcast that you're talking about. But suffice it to say, it's a lot easier to do if there's like a public ledger where you can just go and look and see if you can bully people on chain. So yeah, I think it's really, really bad. And then there's like, the even, darker side of things when it comes to like personal security, right? I mean, if you just want to go and like, be geeked out about like why privacy is important, just like go and like Google 2 words together, crypto kidnapping, Like it's really bad. Like it's a dark thing to talk about, and I don't even like saying it out loud because people have like, experienced really bad things or even been killed over like their keys. And like this is a really bad thing, right? Like financial data should be very secret and very guarded because it creates like a really unfortunate target on your back. And so like I think that even if you're not into trading, like just from like a physical security standpoint, like being able to like not have your wealth like just broadcast out there like to the world on live stream is really bad. That's why like POAPs always sketch me out. Do you know what Kai, you know what POAPs are, right? Joel, do you know what POAPs are?
Eleanor shells them all the time.
Yeah, and they're cool, man. Like I like them. Like, and if you use them, guys, not like just a point of clarity. Please use a burner address that's not associated with anything ever. Like, don't put that on your main address.
POAP is an acronym for Proof of Active Participation, and as far as I understand it, it's basically like a little NFT style thing that you get when you show up to some event and you collect them, like a punch card. Like I've been here. And so I can understand if that's all under these kinds of uses are increasingly popular on stuff like Ethereum, and as these become mainstream, eventually you can have like a perfect geographical tracking. Like Google already has that. Let's be honest, right? For most people, right. I don't know if anyone ever told you, but your phone is spying on you, right? But for the people who don't know that. Google tracks you pretty much everywhere, but now it's like you don't need to be Google to do that. You can just like do like the poaphunt.com, just get in there.
Exactly. Yeah, just go and see if there's somebody who's like wealthy at like this POAP host, POAPed event, if you will.
Yeah, and you can like trace them within a certain geographic. Like, oh, well, he was here yesterday. Oh, must be some kind of like Paris blockchain week type thing. Because he checked into one of these, send one of your big beefy goons to Paris, find this like nerdy mofo there, and just take him for all he's worth, and then dump him in the river. I mean, don't want to be too graphic on that stuff, but it could literally happen. Another layer of that I was just thinking about is that in my, I guess, view, money is sort of like true speech, because you can lie with your speech. You can't really lie with your money. It's an allocation of what you value. And
you either have it or you don't, right?
Yeah, I mean, you're not going to pay for something you don't care for. You're not going to just like, sure, I'll buy a lot of stuff I just do not like or want at all for no reason. It's just not. You can lie all you want. That's why the maximalist doxing thing, kind of from an example from earlier, it's like, oh, you find the truth, but it's like having your financial history doxed at all times is like having like Neuralink where anyone can just tap into your feed at all times and just hear all your thoughts, and it's just like, oh, that could be a problem.
Yeah, imagine it if you're like a national security type person, right? You think about it that way. Like, what if like America's adversaries had like live stream data on like strategically important people and companies like financial health. Like this would be really bad, right? I mean, we could write, I don't know, like Kai, do you have any thoughts on this? I could go on forever about this particular point, but suffice it to say, like publicly broadcasting money isn't like ideal situation at all.
Yeah, I mean, my go-to example is always like, if I was a bad actor. Knows, I like to say, I like to say that phrase a lot. But yeah, if I was a bad actor, I'd just go out to a conference, figure out where all the POAPs, like all the little POAP QR codes, right? Scan them all, figure out what the contract address is for all of these POAPs, and then just set up an alert that as soon as someone with like more than say 100K in their ETH wallet mints one of these, well, it sends me a little alert. And then obviously, if I like very, very hypothetically in Minecraft, I go and follow this person to their hotel room with this $5 wrench that I just bought at the corner store. And you can imagine what happens in Minecraft from there, right?
Of course.
Having all of these things and like interacting financially with this like public data set is just not helpful at all.
Yeah,
Right.
and so I guess kind of like the final thought on that whole thing before we move on to the other stuff. It is kind of like the CBDC subject is becoming very like hot button these days, and especially you get to conservatives and then some of the kind of older generation libertarians. That's just like all they want to talk about is how we have to stop it and stop this like digital currency, and sometimes they lump all of crypto into that, and that's kind of unfair, but sometimes it is because if you think about it, I mean, there's already a whole lot of financial surveillance going on in the legacy systems, but they're kind of siloed and a little like inefficient and all that kind of stuff. But I've noticed stablecoins especially have been the clear winner of payments so far as like everyone's sort of trying to get into this space. Oh, there's so many stablecoins, everything like that.
Right.
And so that puts it onto EVM chains, right? Obviously Ethereum or Tether on Tron if you're in South America or whatever it is. You're like all the way out there. And it just seems like if let's just say the US government says, oh, we're going to come out with a CBDC, and they just keep saying that for the next 20 years, and they never actually do it. They don't have to, because first off, they still issue the dollar, so they can still inflate it at will. But they can also just track everyone's everything. You just look at the big picture of all the transactions happening on these various stablecoins, stitch them together to people, and their POAPs and their, whatever else they do, and then like, run some Ether nodes so they can correlate some IP addresses in case they happen to be missing this one guy's, like, that one little missing piece to link everything. And then all of a sudden, it's like like the free market will provide their own CBDC if the free market does not provide the antidote to the CBDC, i.e. zero knowledge technology.
Yeah, I think like, I was trying to think where the hell I was while you were talking about this. I think I was just in California at like the Stanford Blockchain Week thing. Really cool event, by the way. Shout out to the guys who put that on. Some really nerdy, awesome people were at that event, which was really, really cool. But I mean, I wonder if there's like a path where like, dollar hegemony like actually continues on because of like, stablecoin assets. Like maybe that's like actual like maybe that's like the 5D chess that's going on here. Like maybe you're right. I was having this revelation while you were telling it. It could be true, man. I think that like, yeah, I mean that's what makes it so important. That's what makes like like things like Railgun and like the people who are. I mean, there's other people working on this stuff too, right? There's lots of different projects out there that are doing like on-chain privacy in like the EVM space that are really, really neat. And so like as you dive deep into this rabbit hole, you'll see that there's a lot of people contributing to like this space, and like hopefully this technology becomes like so easy to use, and I mean like easy to use for like builders, right? As easy as like getting an SSL certificate for your website, like that easy. That's when we think, that's in my opinion, that's when this tech will take off, when it's so easy, like because there's so much domain like knowledge. In fact, if you're a builder, right, if you're listening to this and you build stuff, you can go to GitHub and go and read like the get started thing for, it's like the little like how to for Circom library, and it is like hilariously inadequate to like explaining how Circom actually works. Probably not to Kai, right? Like Kai's a Giga Chad like hyper nerd who understands a lot of stuff like this, but like it is really woefully complicated and not very well explained. So like I think like we have to get it to the point where like it is so easy to use that you can't help but add it in. Like you can't help but have this as part of your DApp, your chain, your whatever it may be, like whatever you're iterating on in the space, like it will be the equivalent of an SSL. Because like if you don't have it, like I imagine a future like the utopia of the future will be if like you go to interact with like an application or a chain or something in crypto land, and it does the same thing that your browser does when you're a website doesn't have that little S on it. It doesn't say HTTPS. Like your browser, like Brave will go, warning, danger, Will Robertson. Like you're on a really bad website. You should probably leave because they don't have a valid SSL cert. And like, hopefully the same thing can be true of like, these like zero knowledge type applications, like, Railgun or Zcash or whatever it may be. Right.
Yeah. And as a side note, I know there are some crypto wallets, and we're not talking about like the zero knowledge space now. We're just like the Bitcoin and Dash and other stuff that when you're doing like a coin join, it'll say, warning, you're trying to use too many inputs that could harm your privacy. Do you want to, whatever. Or in the Bitcoin ones, there's like, I know Samurai Wallet has like post-mix services where, for example, it does not allow you to spend your doxic change to, kind of dox your kind of stuff, as they call it, it's in the change address, because if you spend, you get a change back, then it just doxes you entirely. I mean, another thing that makes it CoinJoin such a nightmare if you want to be like solid with privacy, but also like just other stuff like risk score, like internally risk score transactions and actions, and helpfully let you know, hey, you could screw your privacy if you do this. You really want to do that? And like, for example, I remember, I think Naomi was talking about this on the podcast, the Zcash Podcast number 5 a couple months ago, where like the Nighthawk wallet basically warns you when you try to go look up your transaction in a block explorer. Be like, are you sure you want to get into a honeypot real quick? Like, just make sure you know what you're doing, because you could just, anyone who puts an address here, they IP trace you, whatever, and then they start to do that stuff. So yeah, that's an important
side
thing.
Channel leak is a totally other like topic. Like, you have to be very, and again, that's what makes like, again, privacy super hard. You know what I mean? Like, you think about like EVM, right? There's these things called RPCs that people use for a whole myriad of reasons, and like making sure that you're not creating a transaction graph by like, just feeding Alchemy all of your information, or like, tying a specific like VPN to like your transactions all the time. The list goes on. Like, there is an incredible like challenge space, and so like I think that like privacy is like a kind of thing where it's like crawl, walk, run, right? And so like I you kind of gotta like take it in like baby steps. Like, you can't just go straight to like hyper cypherpunk, you know what I mean? Like, I just don't think that's how it happens, at least in my experience, you know what I mean? Like, I've not been able to just like like I'm a privacy pro. It's a lot of it takes a lot of effort and like education, and so like you gotta start with like the simple steps. Not to like reverse the Q&A here, but like, what do you think is like the baby step for like privacy in the online world?
Well, the online world is, that could be potentially
just like
massive.
Broad privacy, right? Yeah, like
broad
what's
privacy,
like the
like,
easiest thing you could do?
So Signal and like Proton Mail, those kinds of things. Like, just get your communications out of that stuff, and then because they're both easy to use, it's like, who needs a high-powered email? You just email, and then your messenger, right? Those are huge. And then when you get to, Brave browser is probably actually easier than those. Just like cut out a lot of the tracking stuff. Already there, you're pretty solid in denying a ton of stuff to those people. Of course, anyone can still trace a bunch of other stuff you do. And then the harder bits, and then you can do a VPN. I mean, VPNs are annoying, and they like, you have to learn how to set one up, and making sure you have a good one. But once you learn,
occasionally it ruins like your streaming capabilities. Netflix sees you're on a VPN and says no.
And you have to turn it off or whatever, and then. But like, as long as you get to just sort of do that, you're pretty good. It's a good start for like basic people. The whole crypto privacy thing, I mean, honestly, as long as you don't give a lot of leakage, like as far as like just telling people what you do with what, the new address every time on a UTXO thing will probably keep a lot of people from like being explicitly doxxed who just aren't like a target. But like, I think that's probably enough to like, you can recommend to some like basic person. But then the problem is like, I don't even know how to start. Like, literally, I think I have to go from 0 to Railgun as far as the EVM world, because there is no, you can, no, it's so. Like,
it is a binary, isn't it?
Yeah, you have to go there. We had a question. Let me find out what that one was exactly. Well, first off, might as well hit this one on Twitter. Ian Sagstetter, hi Ian, says ask them about the risks associated with shielded swaps.
The risks associated with shielded swaps.
I wonder if he's thinking about something specific that has to be teased out, or do you know exactly what he's talking about?
Oh man, I don't know. Kai, what do you think?
I mean, I don't see any extra risks to doing a swap shielded or not. So, yeah, I guess unless there's something like specific, I'm not too sure what the question is.
All right, Ian.
Yeah,
well, if you're still watching this, just throw another tweet response for that.
Very curious what he's thinking about.
Yeah, we'll just move on to the next one about we're talking about transparent address. So this is a big thing in the Zcash world. I don't know if you've noticed, but like one of the biggest controversies, I would say, in Zcash since its inception has been the usage of T-adders, of transparent addresses. And based on just how annoying and difficult the tech is to get to work, and like I think it has had to be a thing, right? Now the problem is just now there's a lot of debate about like, well, most people use T-adders, they don't use Z, so like you're not even getting privacy, and then it reduces your anonymity set because people can see you going in and out of the shielded pool, and if few people are doing that, it's like it could only be a few people. Like all these kinds of concerns, which I think are valid. Of course, when you have like a zero knowledge, like like you don't leak any information basically out of the pool, it makes it a lot easier than, for example, if you were just like one of 5 people coin joining, right? That would be a nightmare. But obviously, Railgun has this problem in spades because all of the EVM ecosystem is super transparent. And Railgun, I'm sure, and shielded pools at all, if there's other ones, right, amount for a fraction, I'm sure, of the volume and coins on a very small fraction on all these platforms. So do you think that actually some dude in the YouTube live chat also said ETH will never be fungible if it's not private by default at the protocol level. So can you kind of just talk about is the existence of a ton of transparent addresses in the ecosystem like an insurmountable problem?
Well, I think the main thing is with zero cash or like Zcash like constructions, it's not necessarily the percentage of the platform transactions that are private, which like determines how private your shielded pool is. It's just simply the size of the shielded pool, right? There's different dynamics with probabilistic privacy, like with some other, mostly when it comes to using decoy style systems. So, coin ring CT, CoinJoin can kind of fall into that as well. But yeah, when you're using like full shielded pool systems, it's just purely the size of the shielded pool. And so, I think like Ethereum's a large enough ecosystem that it doesn't really matter if the majority of the transactions are public, as long as there's enough private activity going on, then you retain your privacy properties in the shielded pools.
And do you think there's enough in the shielded pools? I mean, it's never enough, but
Yeah, I mean, there could always be, there could always be more privacy, right? More privacy, more better, right? But I think that it's in the case of like Railgun, it's steadily growing over time, and so like a bit of like stats, it's the TVL has been pretty steadily growing. The transaction volume is steadily increasing. The the TVL, et cetera, right? And I think what's going to be really important for these types of like, privacy preserving type applications will be like, um, can people use their money in the way that they would like to from this like private, balance? Because that's what DeFi is all about, Degen's got a Degen, like people want to do things with their money on Ethereum, right? So they want to take and put it on Aave. They want to take and buy NFTs. They want to swap. They want to do all the crazy stuff that you read about on Twitter and whatever, right? Like they want to be able to do that. And so like these things have to be like integrated, right? You have to make sure that like people can deploy their capital in the way that they would like. And so that creates like a sticky liquidity type, proposition. And you can kind of see, like with time, like as like more and more integrations into these types of protocols, grows, so like in Railgun's case, you can swap, you can tie your unstoppable domain, you can tie your ENS to it, you can do, I guess like farming on Beefy, for example. There was I think there's an integration in the works for like LP. The list goes on, right? And so like as these boxes get checked, more and more, value, I guess, is proposed of like having this private balance. And so like, it's woefully like ignorant, I think, to say like build it and they will come. But I think you have to like, like give this thing like a feature complete like. You got to give it a bunch of features in order for it to be successful. People don't want to just like hold money privately, like they want to transact with it privately. And so like as you build those, like the TVL increases and the noise increases, and with that, so does the anonymity set.
Yeah, I guess regarding the product thing real quick, I have noticed that there's a lot of like 80 to 90% perfect products that no one will use. And then once you get to like, there's a certain like, is it 87%? Is it 94%? When you hit that point, all of a sudden everyone will use it. There's just like a couple little things like, well, I could do my DeFi trades here, and I can send it and store it. But there's no like, I can't do it with NFTs, so I'm not using it. Or like I am using, or I can do it with NFTs too, but I can't do yield on it. I can't stake it. So I'm just gonna. And then once you have that one thing, then all of a sudden everyone will want to use it.
Right, and I don't want to turn this into too much of like a shill fest for like Railgun, because I think it's super neat, right? But like the architecture for it is really really cool, right? And so like for example, like the address generation is very strictly a BIP32 HD address type thing, right? So it's made it such that like the architecture for it can encompass a lot of different things, because at the end of the day, Railgun is just infrastructure. It is like the technology for people to build like these private integrations. And so it in and of itself isn't like a killer app. You could use it to like, store money and do things, but people have to do things with that technology. Like they have to do things with the SDK, right? And so like the architecture of that code is such that like you can do multi-sig, you can do threshold signatures, you can do like really weird multi-party computation stuff, you can do swaps, flash loans, you can do things like buy crypto dick butts and Trump NFTs if that's what you're into, right? The list goes on. Like, and like the flexibility of that code base is what makes it so interesting for like it to be like a potential player for like that like true private EOA type thing. And so like you're absolutely right. Like you don't know what that killer feature is until it comes, and then like the activity 10x's or something like this, right? But I'm excited to see like if that day comes, like what it'll be, and like I hope it's something really hilarious and like obtuse. That's my only ask. That like whatever causes privacy to take off, it has to be like just something really just hilarious.
Yeah, and isn't that the way it's supposed to be? Like, was it the most entertaining outcome is the most likely? I don't remember what law
Shout out
was.
Elon.
Yeah, I mean, so far it's been kind of true. I mean, I'm having a good time observing stuff. Well, as far as like now, it's like the dip. Now we're talking about the sad stuff. Very briefly touching on the Tornado Cash kind of thing, and so I should just say so. A couple more Tornado Cash founders, devs, whatever, were arrested a couple weeks ago or so, and it's pretty chilling because you got open source devs being arrested. Now, on the other side of things, there's so many people working in the privacy space as a whole, right? And I like Zcash in particular has a lot of like the good stuff, the best stuff. A lot of people working on it. A lot of very public doxed, KYC people in like U.S. jurisdictions and stuff. And to my knowledge, I would be hearing if people were getting kind of arrested and stuff from there. So it's clearly, maybe on the bright side of the cloud is it's clearly that there's like nothing wrong with any of this stuff. But then there like at the same time, there's a lot of uncertainty as far as like what is getting people in trouble. And a lot of people compare Railgun to Tornado Cash probably just because of the ETH thing. But, having a DAO, being ETH, whatever, all that other kind of stuff. And so just generally speaking, I know it's a super sensitive subject, and it's also, I'd rather talk about fun and more interesting things. What's kind of your take on that situation? And then also, do you have any kind of worries about Railgun in this context?
Yeah, so it definitely is a downer to see, people, have these sort of like devastating consequences for, developing, writing and, publishing code, right? This is a really, this is a really bad thing for not just like privacy, but for like open source code in general, right? This is bad for the open source ecosystem. Like if you want to take and write things and explore cryptography, like, this should not be the consequence, right? And so I think that like the Tornado Cash arrests are really bad, right? I mean, it's really quite unfortunate. In fact, people may or may not know, like if you're really interested in like rallying behind these people who wrote this code, they have I think they have like a legal defense fund that you can donate to. I think it's like donate.peppersec.com, which is like the company that they had around that. So like if you're interested in like, helping support their like legal fund, by all means, please go and donate. It's really a challenge, right? And it's expensive to fight the government
right there. Donate.pepper as in grind pepper.
Yeah.
PepperSec
yeah,
as
like
in
pepper,
security.
Yeah, .com. That's that's the one. And so like those dudes, they have a legal defense fund. It's really unfortunate that they have to have one in the first place. But on the, I guess like on the positive side of things, we're starting to see like some people, like some like glimmers of hope, right? There's definitely like some negatives, right? So like there was the Coinbase sponsored Van Loon case down in Texas, which didn't go well, which was basically over the sanctioning of Tornado Cash. Which, by the way, I'm not a lawyer. I'm just an idiot on the internet. I don't have like financial advice or legal advice. I should contextually say. I just have opinions of stuff. But suffice it to say, that didn't go extremely well. Coinbase has gone on record, and I think it was their I forget who it was. I guess it was their like chief legal counsel, who what was his name? Paul Grewal, I guess it was. Part of the Coinbase legal team said that they're going to support an appeal to try to continue to fight that. But there's also positive things that are happening around, open source code and development, and when it comes to like, legal and like, courts and this sort of thing, right? So like, Judge Falia, who's in New York, seems to have like a really good understanding of like LP and this sort of thing and like how Uniswap works. And so, there's some people in the judicial system that seem to who are starting to understand like how this sort of stuff works. And, that's really exciting. There was actually a case that was just finished up in the Southern District of New York. It was, I guess it was like Risley versus the Universal Navigation. Most people probably don't have a clue who Universal Navigation is, but they know who Uniswap is. And effectively, this was like a case against Uniswap, and Uniswap ended up winning this case, right? And the Uniswap developers were found not responsible for the usage of bad users, right? Including like theft, scams, and like illegal securities. And so these guys are just taking and writing code, and can't really control how people use it. And so, albeit this is effectively a civil case, this is a bit of light at the end of the tunnel. And so I'm very hopeful that I'm very hopeful that this sort of stuff works itself out, because it's not okay to lock people up for writing code.
Absolutely.
This isn't like a cool thing to do, and even more frankly speaking, whenever Alexei got locked up in the Netherlands, a lot of people sort of brushed it off as like, well, the Netherlands doesn't have like good due process or something like this, right? And like that wasn't okay. But like now this is happening in the U.S. I'm hoping and seeing at least that a lot more people are taking this much more seriously.
Absolutely.
And so I guess there's people who have like more intelligent takes than I do, but from my perspective, I see that there's definitely like light at the end of the tunnel, especially with like some of these like tangentially related cases, like the Uniswap case, and those guys being found not liable for the usage of bad actors and this sort of thing, where we could sort of see where this could have like a positive outcome. But not just like Railgun, but like the whole of DeFi should watch this and like participate in advocating for DeFi very, very loudly around this particular thing, because it's not just like tornado cash at stake. Like this could set like a really ugly precedent for like the whole of like the decentralized ecosystem. And so I would advise you to really get involved if you care even like a modicum amount for this space.
Yeah, absolutely. And this is obviously it's a very tricky situation. I'm not a lawyer and all that kind of stuff. One thing's for sure with the Alexei arrest in the beginning, I know some people who viewed it as just a purely like isolated like Dutch experience, and
right.
I kind of never did from the start. I kind of saw the U.S. fingerprints on it from the beginning, and now you see the kind of correlation. And I honestly think that the only reason this, like, and this is not like obviously not a legal opinion, just sort of like a policy opinion of, I'm pretty sure the only reason we're even talking about this is because of sanctions. Of the U.S. federal government relies heavily on sanctions as a kind of like thing to, it's like they have to be absolute, otherwise they have to have this illusion of being absolute, otherwise the government loses a lot of air of power in the world. And if you say like, oh look, the North Koreans are doing all this stuff to get around sanctions and stuff, it's just like, well, now it's like matter of national security, they got to do something about it, even if it's illegal, And so let's hope it gets proven to be illegal. Let's hope that these people get out of jail and turn out okay. I guess that's what makes sense. Like, it's kind of funny because I don't think that this is a battle that the U.S. federal government or the Netherlands really explicitly wanted to start. I think they had other motives for start. Maybe this is an optimistic take. I don't know, or if it's a pessimistic take, but I don't think they meant to have this privacy and coding of open source software struggle right now. I think they just wanted to enforce their sanctions, and then now we're all here, and we gotta make the best of it.
Right. Yeah. So people who listen to this stuff, they should really get involved if they genuinely care about like what's about like what's going on, because this stuff really, really matters and has like really deep, deep ramifications depending on like which way this kind of stuff could go. Personally, I'm very hopeful for these guys. I think it's a travesty. I'm hoping that like the whole like code is free speech. This might be like that continuation of that, right? Where it's like code is not just free speech, but the deployment and like experiment with it is as well. And so I would love to see that be the case. And so I'll be haranguing the appropriate authorities in my neck of the woods. I'll be haranguing my senators and things like that. And everybody does the same thing, it's quite important. So
yeah, that makes sense. Kai, you said you had a spicy take on, you had a certain take on default privacy on the protocol layer, I believe it was. Love to hear your thoughts on that.
Yeah. Well, I think, so I understand where that sort of viewpoint comes from, right? If you look at UTXO chains, so Bitcoin, Zcash, and so on, there only is the way that you interact with the chain is highly prescribed. And there's only really one way of doing it, right? Like you sign a transaction and it fulfills some covenant and it happens on chain, or gets included in the block, and that's what happens on chain, right? And so the idea of privacy just really does have to be baked into the protocol layer, and like the kind of bounds around what's private and how those kind of properties work is really baked into the protocol layer. I don't think that that system of thinking doesn't really work when it comes to looking at systems like Ethereum and all, where you can just program the base layer, right? You have the ability to arbitrarily program the way you program in new ways for people to interact with the system, and so there's no kind of you have to prescribe whatever the base layer says is the prescribed way of interacting with the chain. You just have I'll give an example, right? We used to call these smart contract wallets, and now it's been renamed to account abstraction, and everyone's losing their minds over it. And it's been around for a while. But there was these different kinds of accounts, right? So we added in multi-sigs to Ethereum, right? That's not prescribed by the base layer. That's just a new way of interacting with the chain that was added in. We've added in the ability to do social recovery, right? These smart wallets, or add in the ability to have different keys which are allowed to spend different amounts, right? So you're spending less than $100, well, your everyday spend key can do that. But if you want to move a large amount of your balance, well, then you've got your cold storage key. There's these different ways that you can program in to interact with the chain, and I don't think it's helpful to prescribe these a singular way of interacting with the chain, which is not necessarily what's meant by privacy at a base layer. But in effect, that's what it ends up with.
That's what it enforces, basically.
I don't think programming in a prescribed way to interact with the chain is helpful at all. It doesn't help innovation. It doesn't help. It doesn't help privacy either.
Yeah, I guess that's the programmability that sort of throws everything for a loop a little bit. Because to a certain extent, I guess I would agree for non-programmable chains with the original assessment about base layer kind of stuff. Because, for example, with something like Bitcoin, you're sort of advanced coin join is that's the best you can do. And you have to be really careful on your data leakage. And I know there's a lot of people who are really careful, but it becomes such an arduous task just because there's so little you can actually do with it. And so if you argue about the coin join activity of Bitcoin, not to mention obviously the scalability problems that introduces, if you want to compare that with something like Zcash, obviously if you're trying to go for just a payments chain, you want to get it right from the base layer probably. But then when you start to do other things where it's what is Ethereum? It's whatever you want it to be. And then you start to be able to, change that. I guess the programmability thing does kind of change that. But ultimately, I would really, one thing I really like, so I really like, is just a small tangent. I really like, obviously, Naomi Brockwell's privacy education stuff, particularly her short videos, the TikTok ones, because they're just really a short little digestible thing. Do you know this thing is collecting your data, it's spying on you and all that kind of stuff. Okay. There's another person I show all the time who's also on TikTok, who's not a privacy person, but Not Con Jr. is her handle, and she voluntarily doxes people. So someone says, hey, I bet you can't guess who I am or my birthday. And then she'll just like go on.
I've seen that. That is, that's insane.
It's amazing, but it's like, it's all publicly available, like social, like light Googling kind of stuff. It's nothing, you're not actually using anything real for that. And it just, I like that education of like how, like, I think on the whole, society will be a lot better the more people know more ways in which their data, where their data is going, right? Their private information. And so I like, it's not just like everyone use graphene, use a VPN, use Signal. Like, it's not all just that stuff. It's like, as long as people know what they're giving up, now all of a sudden you have like, oh, okay, when I'm tracking my little fitness thing, I have like whoever that data goes to has my constant like location, so they know where I'm at all times, where I live, etc. But then they also know about my general health stuff and might use that to then sell, products to like, targeted advertising from, medical services or something like that. Did you know have high cholesterol?
Your blood pressure is really high. Let me tell you about statins.
Yeah. Or it's just like, and just have a knowledge, even if you still continue to divulge that information to everyone, just knowing that you're doing it is a huge thing. And I think the same thing with like crypto transactions. Like, I think that, it's going to sound like I'm ripping on whoever asked the question, which I'm absolutely not, by the way. But I just think that a lot of people don't understand privacy, and they have these things in their brain that's like, okay, like this is a line. Let me hit them with this one. Like, but if it's not base layer, and they don't understand how that works. And like it's just like a smart sounding question to ask, and it is a smart question, I guess, right? It has some actual ramifications as we just discussed. But I kind of like to say like, well, like the one thing. Okay, mini rant, and then I'm done with like using up dead space for this stuff. One of the things that just drives me so nuts is when you have Monero people, again, sorry, I don't want to annoy them again, but talking about fungibility. They're super obsessed with that one characteristic, and they seem to exclude everything that is not Monero by an arbitrary thing. It's just like, fungibility is super important. This is what it means, and my favorite project is the only one because of this. And it starts to get into some like really weird, like not understanding. Like, I think like ETH is pretty perfect. It's pretty fungible, right? An ETH equals an ETH, and you don't have UTXOs. It's just in account balances. Of course, there can be some harm to fungibility because of privacy. But for example, if you just like can dump it into Railgun and then later it goes out at some other point, it's not like, oh well, you can't move these ETH because it's a different value than this ETH, and also if you have like an NFT on Monero, for example, which they do have some of those, then that harms your privacy there, and then your Monero is not fungible anymore. And there's as far as I know, like it was a previous bug, right, where if you resent it too soon after you received it, then you would basically ruin your privacy there. So then like there's a time-locked Monero is not like recently received Monero is not as valuable as older Monero kind of thing. So it's kind of like, it's just like a very like, I'd like to have people understand how privacy affects them in their transactions rather than try to hit these like smart sending gotcha questions about, this. But it's like, well, yeah, just understand the information you're leaking and you're divulging and how it can be used for you or against you, and just do your best in that context.
Yeah, I mean, I guess like it's important to note that like privacy is a spectrum, right? There's different.
That's another thing that people get mad at you for saying. No, it's binary. You're either private or you're not.
Yeah, well, please at me with your hot takes on Twitter.
Is your account monetized? You should have monetized your account before that.
But suffice it to say, like privacy is a spectrum, right? There's different threat vectors that you have to consider, right, and attack. And I think that privacy is not a binary, whereas like Zcash wins and everybody loses, right? Or like Monero wins and everybody else loses, right? Or Railgun's the best, or I don't know, fucking Nocturne or whatever. He can call these new things, right?
Panther
there's
protocol.
only one privacy protocol to rule them all, right? It's so silly, right? But I believe that like Ethereum is like, again, we're gonna have all the hot takes right at the end. So people who are listening will have all the good. If you're listening to the end, you get the juice.
Oh man,
right? But Ethereum,
I got another bit of spice to add on this as well.
Okay.
Yeah, well, it's Ethereum is by and large like the largest ecosystem in terms of like transaction volume. People use it a lot. There's a lot of money here, and like these people who are using it, there should be privacy tools associated with it, right? That's the most layman answer that you could give. Like if there isn't privacy there, like can people bring privacy to that ecosystem, right? Are there different trade-offs and like things to consider with it? Yes. Are there different things that you should consider and think about with Zcash? Absolutely. Monero, same thing. Different VPN providers. Yes, there's a lot of different things that you should consider with all the tools that you want to use, right? Should you buy a Toyota or a Honda? It depends, right? It depends on your use case. So, like, I think that there's like non-base layer privacy solutions that do make a lot of sense for different reasons.
Yeah.
But Kai, please give us your juicy take.
Yes.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think it's important to realize, right, that okay, well, the spicy bit up first. All privacy is optional privacy if you push it far enough, right? And like it's just a matter of how far are you willing to push something in order to like de-anonymize it, right, or de-privatize it. And I think there's like legitimate cases where you don't want something to be private. Like if we're talking about like purely transaction chains, right, on like Bitcoin or Zcash or whatever, I think like it's a lot easier to kind of prescribe a way that everyone kind of just interacts with the chain, because the like number of use cases that you have on those chains they're very limited, right? Like you send, you receive, you hold. Like, what else do you do, right? In like an ecosystem where there's like, I don't know, like there's whatever your imagination really is of like use cases, right? Like the argument that everything needs to be absolutely private just kind of it doesn't work when you look at like the reality of like, well, yeah, there are things that need to be shared, right? I mean, we brought up
state of a smart contract.
Yeah, like we brought up at the start of the podcast, right? Like I want to look at something that claims to be over collateralized, and I want to look at it and I want to be like, well, it says there's $1 billion like outstanding. Does it have $1 billion? At least $1 billion in collateral, right?
Yeah. Tether.
And
I'd like a lot more transparency around Tether.
Yeah.
Shout out.
Right. Like,
shout out to Tether.
So there's these like good reasons for it, and it's just like, do you want to put people into a situation where they're forced to push their like level of privacy or like the deprivatizing things to the extreme in order to be able to like function with these requirements, right? Like, let's see if I can find this prop here. All right, right. Like, if you made everything fully private, right? Like, I'm forced to sit here like this when I'm interacting with the computer. If there's something that I want to like, reveal to someone, right? And so I think it's not a matter of like, hey, do I make everything at the base layer private? It's like, well, how do you build out a tool system for people to apply the right level of privacy and be like conscious of what those privacy properties are to the right use case.
Yeah. And it just as two random crypto kind of thing, examples of this. First of all, I do manage a community donation funded project. And as such, I use my wallet to not only be transparent, but disable change addresses. So literally one address on the blockchain is where everything is, and you can see everyone it goes to. And it's just like, so there's no funny, like, because I don't want people, man, what are you doing? You stealing, you scamming. Like, no, it just, everything's super transparent because, I want to be clear about that. And then the other thing is, often, like, there's something very useful about being able to show a merchant who you just paid, but something went weird with the wallet UI, that you just paid them on a block explorer. And this is one thing that, like, there's so many funky wallets, and this is something I actually have in Zcash right now, is I have funds in a couple of different shield pools, right? And I'm trying out every wallet that there is right now for Zcash, and each one tells me I have a different balance. And normally I could just like look it up on a block explorer and just see how much, like, but you can't really do, like, it just starts to, like, obviously because there's like private funds and stuff, it's not like I want everyone to know, but at the same time there's just like, transparency can really help a whole lot of things, and there's some like goofiness. It just becomes tricky. It complicates things when you make everything super private, but that doesn't mean you shouldn't be able to make it super private. I gotta, let's end it. Like, I don't want to end this podcast on a shill for maximum transparency because Railgun to zero. Look at these guys. They're coming at the tail end, and they're just like.
I guess my point was, like, you're making everything from a technical perspective super private. Like, in reality, makes things less private because you force people to have to take more drastic steps in order to, like, reveal the information they need to reveal.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
So, before we wrap up, what cool stuff are you guys working on? Anything else you could talk about, cool stuff that's coming up on the horizon?
Oh, man, what is not coming up on the horizon? Moon soon, boys. Yeah, great question, man. So let's see. In terms of like Railgun, there's a lot of things that I think that are being worked on by the community that's really, really interesting. The cool things that I see are some people who are working on a private payroll infrastructure, which is really, really cool. These guys in Amsterdam, they worked on a hackathon project called ZK Pay, which is really neat. Seeing that coming along, it's kind of cool. There are some interesting like contracts, changes and like research going around this whole new like architecture for Railgun, which should help save gas, which everybody on Ethereum would be excited about. Paying less gas is obviously something that someone wants to do, right? There's like new accumulator model research happening. There's like research happening around like using recursive snarks instead of Groth16, which is really interesting. We've kind of seen that transition happen in the ZK space, particularly, Zcash, for example, they moved away from Groth16 to, their new Halo 2 type construction, and that's really, really neat. And so obviously there's some exploration there. There's some new like DeFi interactions that we're seeing. There's a team called Railway. They built a wallet, and they're taking the SDK and doing all sorts of really neat stuff with it, which is really cool to see. There's swaps. There's like farming. I think they're going to release like LP and stuff like this soon. And so like seeing like the use cases grow is something that I'm really excited about. But the thing that I'm most excited about, at least in my opinion, is there's this thing called Proof of Innocence that came out actually early in the year. It was around Tornado Cash sanction time. This team called Chainway. Yeah, there's this team called Chainway that developed this thing called Proof of Innocence, and the TLDR for it, if you don't want to read about it, dear listener, is that people could take and provably, in a zero knowledge, in other words, a privacy preserving way, prove that they were not on a subset, like a list of actors that were deemed bad, right? And so in other words, you could have like this zero knowledge based like compliance mechanism that will allow you to prove that your funds aren't of a nefarious source. And this is really, really neat to me.
Yeah,
because
without proving the source of your funds, right?
Just exactly. Not revealing, where they came from. That's none of your business. How much money I have, again, none of your business. But I can prove to you that I'm not on some sort of like arbitrary list of bad actors. And that's like the coolest, to me, like that's one of the coolest tricks that you could do with zero knowledge is like, I could like, basically just give you a thumbs up out of my balance. That's the only thing that you can see. And the rest of it is like, you don't get to learn any of it. Right. So this is really, really cool to me. Like this checks a lot of boxes, right? Because it's like a provably, mathematically sound system that you could use. You could provide it to, if you use centralized exchanges, you could provide this to centralized exchanges. And so I think this, sort of could be like a new like supplement to like, people's everyday like, concerns around like privacy, because like a lot of people have fear around using privacy tools. If we're all just being honest with ourselves, like average people would want privacy. It's very arguable, right? Quick show of hands of people talking here today, like who wants to like just give out their bank details? Trick question for Joel. He doesn't have any.
Yeah.
But suffice it to say, no one wants to give that shit out, right? But people also don't want to be seen as a bad actor, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
It's these kind of like pragmatic tools that can like allow people to do that, like are really, really interesting to me. And so these Chainway guys are working on one for the Railgun system. And I think that that's really trick, man. I think that's like a really, really cool thing that would be really interesting. And I look forward to seeing where that goes, right? So I'm interested in saving gas. I'm interested in doing new things with private balances. And, those things are coming. And I'm interested in this new ZK compliance stuff. I think it's neat, man. What about you, Kai?
Yeah, I think you've like listed off just about everything that's coming up. Now, what's most exciting for me though is I think we've got some like really nutty like new cryptography. Well, not specifically new like cryptography as in maths, but like implementations of cryptography that's coming up that just I think really like addresses the number one complaint about using things on Ethereum is like, hey, Ethereum expensive.
Yeah, did you see my tweet about that the other day? It was like, yeah, it's for the people who don't follow me on Twitter, the sad people. Where did I say it? It was about sorry, keep going. I'll find it.
Yeah, but like basically, it's like Ethereum's expensive. Like that's what it
was. If I win the lottery,
secret,
I won't
right?
tell anyone, but there will be signs like actually using Ethereum layer 1.
Yeah. So if you can like bring down the gas cost of using things on Ethereum like Railgun, you'd that's like just probably the biggest kind of benefit in terms of reducing the barrier to entry for like the Railgun privacy system.
Yeah, I mean it sounds good. I'm very interested in the proof of innocence stuff, obviously for a privacy standpoint, for literally the targeted use case, right? But I'm also very interested in that that proving something without, I mean, literally the whole part of zero knowledge proofs, right, is the zero knowledge proof part of like the applications to anything else. Like for example, like, are you in a certain geographical location? Are you within a certain vicinity? And it says yes, but I won't tell you where. that kind of thing. Or
Right.
do you have enough money? Yes, but you don't know how much I have. Like, can you, like, especially because when you do things like apply for a mortgage or whatever else like that, so I'm told, you have to basically dox your entire bank account. And like, so for example, I know that I used to, in a previous life, work as a bankruptcy paralegal, and I did a lot of, I went through so many people's bank statements, because you need like 6 months of bank statements or whatever, and all this kind of stuff. And like, it'd be great to just say, like, prove how much money I have or don't have without actually saying it, without being stupid, without actually telling the whole world. There's just so many things, like, it just goes on. And I would, like, especially for identity, like, is this person a friend of yours? Yes. Like, who are all your friends? You don't know, like, or it goes on and stuff. And like, I was thinking it could also go to like a salary negotiation type thing, where there's always this like game of chess with like, how much did you make at your previous job? Was it more than this? How much do you want to make here? I would rather make this. What's the industry standard? Blah, 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 blah. And like, there's just all these like questions that everyone wants to know without revealing everything, without full transparency. And it's just like, you don't want to know what all your coworkers make, because then you start to hate them and want to stab them or whatever. And then just being able to like selectively say, like, reveal things without revealing anything is just really cool, I think.
I think it would provide a lot of magic to like medical research. I can imagine like a scenario where people could use like zero knowledge to share like medical data in like very large data sets throughout like the medical ecosystem to do really, really cool medical research that could like, save lives. I think that'd be really neat, right? And do it in a privacy preserving way, like they're obliged by HIPAA. So I agree. There's a lot of really, really good stuff that could happen.
The last thing regarding like, I guess, health and fitness tracking is, it would be great to be able to just give an insurance provider or whoever a clean bill of health proof to lower your premiums without actually divulging any information about your actual medical history. Just be like, I'm healthy.
Yeah, I'll give my fitness tracker to my really like fit friend. To like, hey man, can you wear this for a couple of weeks? No reason.
Yeah. And then like, it turns out that he has like a rare form of blood cancer, and you're like, oh no. And then two horrible things. All right, it's starting to go off the rails, pun very much intended. Let's wrap this thing up. Where can people follow you guys personally, and then Railgun?
I mean, I'm not incredibly hard to find on the internets. I'm on the good old Twitter. I think you added me in like the show notes or something like that, which people can find me there. I'm a pretty frequent flyer in like the Railgun telegrams too. There's this thing called Church of Railgun on Telegram. If you're not on there, tough noogies, you should maybe join Discord. And if you're not on there, if you're not on Discord, Twitter, or Telegram, I'm a ghost. So feel free to get in contact with me there.
Yeah. I mean, I'm Mesquka on Twitter. Or you could probably, you can find whatever else at mesquka.com. There's a bunch of links there. But Twitter is probably my most public, or my most active public-facing profile.
Yeah, you get a good amount of shit posting in there for sure.
Yeah, plenty of memes.
Which is good. I mean, on a personal note, I have been the last few days like turned into a reply guy, and it's boosted my engagement a lot, and I might be able to monetize soon, which is nice. But just as a disclaimer, I get like, it's not like, not everyone can do the Justin Bonds like long informative thread thing and nothing else. Like, no, some people have to like, some people gotta have fun.
Yeah, boots. When you monetize, beers on you, bro.
the memes drive the societal change.
The memes must
Amen.
flow. Yes, the memes must flow.
Yeah.
All right. With that, thanks very much, gentlemen. It's been an honor. Always good having you guys on. And everyone remember your phone is spying on you. Stay healthy. Don't disclose any financial information you wouldn't want everyone to know. And use Zcash to buy stuff if you can. Use Railgun for all your DeFi, degen, Trump NFT stuff, whatever you want to do. And have a good week. I'll see you guys either in a few hours for my new show, or next week for other things, or next month for the next Zcash podcast. And by the way, if you've been enjoying the Zcash podcast, I think this is the 9th episode out of 12. And so if you want me to try to renew it or whatever, let me know if you like it, and I'll see. All right, guys, have a good weekend. Have a good everything else, and bye-bye.
Awesome. Thanks for having us.
GM.
Mm-hmm.